Right before a plant dies, it does something that science still can't fully explain. It becomes more healing than it has ever been in its entire life. And the reason why might change the way you see your own darkest moments. We live in a world that worships the bloom, the peak, the prime. We celebrate the flower when it opens, the tree when it's green, the person when they're young, successful, shining. But what about the fade? What about the wilt? What about the season when everything here seems to be breaking down? Maybe you've been there. Maybe you're there right now. That place where your energy is running low, where the color feels like it's draining from your days, where you wonder if your best moments are behind you. If so, I need you to stay for this one, because nature has a secret about endings, a secret that medicine, psychology, and ancient wisdom all agree on. And it begins with a dying plant. Every autumn, something extraordinary happens across the forests of the world. Something we've watched a billion times, but almost never truly seen. The leaves change color. They fall. The branches go bare, and we call it death. But here's what's actually happening beneath the surface. At the molecular level, inside the cells of that leaf, inside the chemistry of that dying plant. And it is nothing like what you'd expect. When a plant begins to die, whether from the cold of autumn, from drought, from injury, or simply from age, its internal chemistry doesn't slow down. It accelerates. The plant enters a phase that scientists call senescence. And during senescence, something remarkable occurs. The plant begins producing a flood of chemical compounds, antioxidants, alkaloids, phenolics, terpenes, flavonoids, at concentrations far higher than at any other point in its life. Let me say that again. A plant, in the act of dying, becomes more chemically complex, more potent, and more medicinally powerful than when it was healthy, green, and thriving. And that is not a coincidence. Let's start with something you might have in your kitchen right now. Basil, rosemary, thyme, lavender. Herbalists have known for centuries, that the most potent time to harvest a medicinal plant is not when it's young and lush. It's later. It's when the plant is stressed, when it's flowering for the last time, when it's on the edge. For a long time, this was considered folk wisdom. Beautiful maybe, but unscientific, until modern biochemistry caught up. In the early 2000s, researchers at multiple universities began measuring the chemical output of plants under stress. Heat stress, cold stress, drought, UV radiation, physical damage, and end-of-life senescence. What they found was consistent and stunning. When a plant is stressed or dying, it activates what's called the secondary metabolite pathway. These are chemicals that the plant doesn't need for basic survival. Not for photosynthesis, not for growth, not for reproduction. These are chemicals produced for defense, for communication, for legacy. Alkaloids like morphine, caffeine, and quinine, compounds that have shaped human medicine for millennia, are secondary metabolites. Flavonoids that protect our hearts. Terpenes that calm our nervous systems. Phenolic compounds that fight cancer cells in laboratory studies. All of them surge dramatically when a plant is approaching death. Now, here's where it gets philosophical. Why? Why would a dying organism invest its last remaining energy, not into survival, not into holding on, but into producing chemicals that heal other living things? Think about that for a moment. A plant that will never see tomorrow spends its final hours creating medicine. There are several theories, and each one is more beautiful than the last. The first is ecological. When a plant produces these intense concentrations of defensive chemicals at the end of its life, those compounds leach into the soil as the plant decomposes. They become part of the earth. They suppress harmful bacteria. They deter certain insects. They protect the seeds the plant has already dropped. In other words, the plant's dying chemistry is a gift to its children, a shield laid down by a parent who will never see its offspring grow. The second theory is communicative. We now know, thanks to groundbreaking research by ecologist Suzanne Samar and others, that plants communicate through underground fungal networks, the so-called Wood Wide Web. When a dying tree knows it's going, it doesn't just fade away. It dumps its remaining sugars, its nutrients, its chemical wisdom into the network. It sends its resources to neighboring trees, to younger trees, even to trees of different species. A mother tree, in her final act, feeds the forest. She doesn't hoard. She doesn't collapse inward. She gives everything away. The third theory is perhaps the most profound, and it comes not from botany, but from the intersection of biology and philosophy. Some researchers believe that the surge of secondary metabolites at end of life is not purely functional. It may be an emergent property of biological systems under existential stress, a kind of chemical transcendence. The organism, freed from the biological imperative to grow, to compete, to reproduce, is suddenly free to create, free to synthesize compounds it never had the energy or the reason to make before. Its chemistry becomes art. Its final expression becomes its masterpiece. Now, I want you to think about your own life, because you're not so different from that plant. There are seasons in a human life that feel like dying. The end of a relationship, the loss of someone you love, a career that crumbles, a health diagnosis that steals the future you imagined, a depression so heavy that getting out of bed feels like lifting the earth. In those moments, everything in our culture tells us we are diminished, broken, past our prime, that our best days are behind us. But what if, just like the plant, those moments of breaking down are actually moments of breaking open? Psychology has a name for this. It's called post-traumatic growth, and the research on it is extraordinary. Studies by psychologists Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun, the pioneers of this field, have shown that a significant percentage of people who endure severe trauma, loss, or suffering don't just recover. They transform. They report deeper relationships, a greater sense of personal strength, a richer appreciation for life, new possibilities they never would have seen from the comfort of their previous existence, and, perhaps most strikingly, a deepened spiritual or philosophical understanding of what it means to be alive. Their chemistry changes too, not metaphorically, literally. Neuroscience shows that people who move through profound suffering and emerge with growth show altered patterns of neural connectivity. Their brains form new pathways. Their default mode network, the part of the brain associated with self-reflection, meaning-making, and narrative identity, becomes more active, more integrated, more complex. They produce different neurochemistry, more oxytocin, more endogenous cannabinoids, the body's own calming system. Their cortisol patterns stabilize in ways that suggest not the absence of stress, but a mastery of it. Just like the dying plant that floods itself with healing compounds it never made before, the suffering human mind begins to produce wisdom, compassion, creativity, and depth that were simply not accessible in easier times. The parallel is not poetic decoration. It may be a fundamental principle of living systems. That destruction precedes the deepest creation, that the crack is where the most powerful medicine forms. So what do we do with this? How do we carry this knowledge into our actual, messy, complicated lives? 3 things. First, respect your winters. Stop treating your difficult seasons as failures. They are not. They are the senescence, the quiet, invisible phase where your deepest chemistry is changing, where compounds of character and wisdom are being synthesized in the dark. You cannot rush spring, and you cannot skip the part where the old leaves fall. Second, get close to nature during your hardest times. This is not soft advice. This is neurochemistry. Research from Japan's forest bathing studies, from attention restoration theory, from environmental psychology, all of it points to the same conclusion. When a human being in psychological distress immerses themselves in a natural environment, their cortisol drops. Their prefrontal cortex, the seat of clarity, decision-making, and emotional regulation, comes back online. Their rumination, the toxic mental loop of overthinking, decreases measurably within 20 minutes. Nature doesn't give you answers. It gives you the space to hear your own. And third, the most important one, understand that your most powerful contribution to this world may not come from your season of blooming. It may come from your season of letting go. The book you write after the heartbreak, the kindness you show after the betrayal, the patience you find after the loss. The hand you extend because you know what it feels like to fall. That is your secondary metabolite. That is your alkaloid. That is the medicine you produce when everything else has been stripped away. And it will heal someone. Maybe someone you'll never even meet. There's an old oak I pass sometimes on evening walks. It's been struck by lightning at least once. Half its crown is bare. Lichen covers its lower trunk. By every measure, it is past its prime. But last autumn, I watched a biologist take samples from its bark. She told me that the concentration of tannins, compounds with antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory, and wound-healing properties, was 3 times higher than in the younger oaks nearby. This broken, ancient, fading tree was producing more medicine than any tree in the forest. She looked at me and said something I will never forget. She said, "The forest doesn't waste its elders. Their dying is their deepest service." So if you are in your autumn right now, if the leaves are falling and the light feels thin, don't believe the lie that you are finished. You're not dying. You are becoming medicinal. If this resonated with you, if it found you at the right moment, I'm glad you stayed. This channel, The Plant Mind, is a place where we explore these quiet intersections. Nature, psychology, the inner life, the things we feel but rarely have words for. If you'd like to walk this path with us, subscribe. Not because we're asking you to, but because something in you already knows this is the kind of content your mind needs more of. Leave a thought in the comments. Tell me, what season are you in right now? And share this with someone who's going through their autumn. They need to hear this. Until next time, be gentle with your roots.